Good morning, good morning, good morning. Today, welcome. And this video is just going to be our next set of tales on the Ulster Cycle of the Celtic mythology, Irish Celtic mythology. So please join me. This first video is just going to be a little bit about the Ulster Cycle and what we can expect. Okay, good morning everybody. Today is starting the Ulster Cycle, so I felt it was important that people understand that there are levels of cycles in the Irish Celtic mythology, and the one we're going into is the Ulster Cycle. Primarily what you're going to hear in these set of tales from ancient Ireland is, of course, the stories of Cú Chulainn, his deeds, his life, his death, which in turn primarily brings in the Morgan, and a lot of the lore we know about the Morgan come from this set of tales, other than, of course, the Second Battle of Moratorium. But we get a lot of how she is, what the goddess is, from this particular cycle of stories. So especially if you're a follower of the Morgan, this is very heavily the set of stories to pay attention to. The Ulster Cycle, also known as the Red Branch Cycle, consists of a group of sagas and, of course, romantic tales, because what's an Irish story without a few, romance here and there? Of course, the Irish had an interesting way of the romantic tales, as we could tell from the previous set of tales in the Tales of the Tuatha De Danann. And dealing with most parts the traditional heroes, is now in eastern Ulster, especially the district, and included by the present counties of Loch and Down. The chief stronghold of ancient Ulster was Erranmacca, which is said to have been destroyed in approximately AD 332, which has been identified with the Navan Fort and grassy mound not far from Arranrath. Here, according to tradition, ruled the powerful King Conchobar, surrounded by a band of chosen warriors whose exploits suggest, at times, those of King Arthur's Knights of the Round Table, prominent among the warriors of the Red Branch, Carabro. This is where the Welsh stories, because the Celtic Welsh mythology really deals with the stories of King Arthur, whereas the Irish ones tend to stay away from that story. So because the Celtic umbrella term Celtic is a whole bunch of different countries all together in Celtic culture, you got some of them are Welsh Celtic, Scottish Celtic, Irish Celtic, as we know, Britannic Celtic. And so there is a lot in their stories, and lore are different. This is why it is important when you're studying to very, 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 very specific and know whether the stories and pantheons you're dealing with are coming from the Irish Celts, Welsh Celts, Scottish Celts, British Celts. It's all different lore, all different pantheons that unfortunately nowadays have all been mushed together. So I deal with strictly the Irish Celtic. Stan van Merkthroog, Butler of the Poison Tongue, Conal and Victorious, Longthor Leary, the Triumph, Sathar MacIll, and the Wise Counselor, Corb the Druid, and most famous of all of the heroes in Irish mythology is, as we all know, drumroll for him, the young, the youthful Cú Chulainn, and his great deeds from the subject of some of the finest Irish tales. And a lot of this cycle deals with those tales. In the ancient sagas, Ulster occupies the position of a proud and highly antagonistic to the rest of Ireland. Although her special heraldry enemy is Connacht, ruled by an Amazonian queen, Mav, and her husband Al, who, like Conchobar, are represented as surrounded by a court comprised of distinguished warriors. Rathcollan, now Rathcúgan, an ancient capital of Connacht, is often referred to in the sagas of the Ulster Cycle as The portrayal of Irish civilization in pagan times, the stories of the Ulster Cycle are of the highest significance, preserved in manuscripts dating from the 12th to the 15th century. So these stories are very old, like I said, and would have been written from, yes, unfortunately from Christian monks, but they would have been written down from people that have practiced pre-Christian ways and just spoken to the monks so the monks can write them down. They were written down in the 12th to 15th century, but these sagas we can trace back orally to much earlier period, and having been transcribed from original written as early as the 8th century and before that. The culture portrayed is moreover in general that which prevailed in Ireland before the beginning of the Christian era. The population not yet united under a central government headed by the Ulaid, or High King, and is divided into groups, each inhabiting its own district and province known as Cóth or Fifth. The Ulaid, the or Ulstermen, occupying the north, with their capital at Macha, the Concran or Concaltman, the west, where their capital at Concran near Shannon in the southeast, the north and south Legan, the Leinstermen, and of course the southwest, the inhabitants of the province now known as Munster. The historical district of Meath, carved the centre of Ireland after establishment of the High Kingship in the 2nd century after Christ, is unknown in the earliest sagas as also Tara, which did not become known the centre of government of Ireland till several centuries later. Each Colprad was occupied by numerous tuatha, or, tribes, which again were subdivided into still smaller groups, bounded together by an elaborate system of blood kinship and ruled over by kinglets and chieftains of varying degrees of importance, all subject, at least in, theory, to the Recol, or king of the province. The civilization reflected in older sagas is pastoral, though generally lacking in idyllic elements, often associated with pastoral life, and depict pastoral or drowy life, is depicted in literature outside Ireland. The chief wealth consisted in cattle and swine. This is very important because, especially when we deal with Cú Chulainn stories, a lot of them dealt with the cattle raids. They were very important because your wealth was in your cattle, so if they got raided, that's just somebody taking basically your wealth. And even bride price, you got swine or cattle for that, which fed on the wide moors in the loud great forests and anciently clothed a large part of Ireland, which again makes sense that you had the leather from the cow giving you clothing. Even female slaves, also in medium of exchange, were valued in terms of cows. So basically what that is saying is that in those times, a slave would be considered, you'd say, oh, this slave is good, so it's worth 10 cows. Or, yeah, this slave sucks ass, it's only worth 1 cow. So that basically really their money was really important into this whole idea of cow. It is also significant that one of the most important groups of Irish heroic tales consists of Táin, or the cattle raids. The longest epic of the Ulster Cycle has for its central theme an attempt made by men of Colchra and their allies to carry off a famous bull belonging to Ulster chieftain. Both dwellings of the household equipment were simple. The typical establishment of a chieftain consisted of a barn-like structure, or hall, an interior of which was a single large room with bunks and couches along the sides, and in the middle, a fire, along with cooking kettle or beer vat. Kind of like the long houses of, say, the Norse or Vikings. Again, a lot of that is, whether you were called a Viking, or, Norse, to be more specific, because Viking was a job title, or a Celt was based on the site of the river. The Norris had the northern part of the river. If you were a Celt, you were the southern, more southern. So, again, this shows why their mead halls and great halls looked eerily similar. It's even said that you could be blindfolded, not knowing which you were on, and they'd sound exactly the same. Okay. The smoke was also allowed to find its way out through a roof hole. During inclement weather and doorways might closed by the screens made of woven wattles, the hall adjacent structures were surrounded by one or more moats of earth mounds, the latter smoted by sharpened stakes and timbers in defense. Of the region of pagan Irish, we learned little of a specific nature from the sagas, or indeed from any other source. From the mere evidence at our disposal, we infer that the ancient Celts, Irish Celts, worshipped the sun and moon and natural objects such as trees, waters, and just as the gods adored with religious rituals, they practiced in largely matter of speculation. For the readers of this volume, its most significant point lies in the fact that they believed in another world, located within the natural or artificial mounds, or beneath the lakes and springs, also known as fairy mounds, inhabited by a race of fae folk endowed with youth, beauty, and immortality, whose issued forth the time of married, abducted mortals, and even took part in tribal feuds. These an ancient manuscript informs us that were the or earth gods of ancient Irish. They often referred to early Irish literature as the Tuatha De Danann, or tribes of the goddess Anu or Danu. For the Asshi, the she of modern Irish folk, an important role as intermediaries between mortals and supernatural beings appears to have been played by the Druids, who has also acted as wise men and seers. We should be far wrong if we concluded that these facts of ancient Irish were merely parcel of scramblings and lawless supernatural savages. Of course, we'd be wrong to say that. They possessed an elaborate system of laws, which reveals a highly developed sense of personal property, rights, and legal procedure. Their skills in music made Irish minstrels and popular entertainers famous throughout medieval Europe. Their literary men were not only required to know a large number of traditional stories, but were trained in the art of composing new ones. The poets of ancient Ireland were highly skilled in metrical devices, including a large number of complicated verse forms known as modern English poetry. Early Irish lyric poetry also reveals a delicate feeling for nature, which would have been difficult to parallel from any other nature. Pagan Irish decorative art, as illustrated by many gold ornaments and other objects discovered through archaeology, is marked by designs of extraordinary complication and beauty. Early Celtic art formed the basis of manuscript decorations, which was imitated widely in medieval times and generally admired even today. Your cladach, if you wear a cladach, is formed. You got your triskel, lots is shared. Above all, the ancient Irish shared with Gaulish Celts the ideals of honor, fair play, and respect. Hear these words, I'll say them again. Respect for women, which was later destined to become the essentials of 12th century chivalry at its best.